This is Han Solo, and I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours right here on the Midnight Shift.
It's time to BS.
Vince Stover, the man of the Sports Stove podcast, football show, Eastern Kentucky football, Green Bay Packers, I see behind you.
Yes, sir.
Big Favre guy, I see.
Yeah, well, let's put it this way. I was named after Vince Lombardi, and my son,
I would have guessed that.
my oldest son is named Brett. So the way it works around here. So we Packer faithfuls. I was born and raised that way. Dad he never forced me into it. You know, he was kind enough to let me kind of find my own way into the Packer world. But and one of my kids, Brett, has done the same. My youngest is not a Packer fan, but we haven't kicked him out of the house just yet. So
haven't kicked him out of the house yet, he says. So how would for those who don't know who you are. Yep. Who is Vince Stover? Who is Vince Stover, the podcaster? Who is Vince Stover, the man, the father, the fan?
Yeah, that's an interesting question that I've asked that question to other people before. I don't think I've ever answered it before.
Well, go for it, man. Take your time. We're good.
Yeah. So I was raised in a very conservative, very religious home. Our family's been Baptist our whole life. And so I grew up actually in church camp ministry. So my dad helped run a church camp in Tennessee. It was an amazing, amazing childhood. So the camp, 1,300 acres, a whole bunch of horses, swimming pools, sport fields, all that kind of stuff. So it was a really cool childhood. No doubt about that. So, everything that I am today is very much tied to my upbringing. There was a time in my life, senior year of high school, freshman year of college, where I was looking at maybe going a completely different direction. But ultimately, I've kind of just stuck with my roots, and everything that I am has a very big tie back to my dad. And my mom, and to my upbringing, the people I was raised around, pastors and just people around at the camp ministry and things of that nature. And so, as a husband and a father, I've been married 19 years. And I was talking with someone else recently. It's like, man, when I got married, I was 21, 22, I think, something like that, 22, I guess. And, when at that age, you get married because she's pretty, and that's kind of all you're thinking about. And in 19 years, I've come a long way as a husband. I'd like to think, at least, and and grown to just be a much better husband than I was 19 years ago. And then as a dad, man, my kids they're 17 and 14. And so it's a whole new era of life for us, right? Driver's license recently, college is coming up soon. And boy, you start to get scared. For me, my kids were younger. Nothing worried me. Everything was good, whatever. Now I'm starting to realize they're not going to be in the house a whole lot longer. And now I'm starting to think, well, have I done right? Have I got them where they need to be as we send them out into this world? And so right now I'm a nervous parent. I haven't been that way before, but I'm a nervous parent for sure. And that's a scary time. It's my first time going through it, of course. So we'll see how it shakes out.
You mentioned earlier in the answer to this previous question about your upbringing on the church ministry camps, and the horses and stuff like that. I have that image in my head now, which is all like horses and pastures and stuff like that over down in Tennessee, and I just think of it as exactly what my brain would come up to be, just like the cliches galore, just barns everywhere. You got a few like saloons over there. Just thinking about it.
Well, it's funny. So we had about 100 horses, and we did trail rides for the campers and stuff like that would come in for the week. And that was the main use of the horses, was just trail rides. We had and they still do, I'm not there anymore, but they had like a souvenir shop and snacks and all that kind of stuff, and it was in a Western motif, so the whole frontage of it looked like a Western town. It's called Cowboy Town. So you had the saloon, or not the saloon, what did you have, the canteen, and I don't remember what everything was called now, but yeah, so that was pretty cool, and the campers should go in and get ice cream, snacks, whatever, t-shirts, all that kind of good stuff. So that was pretty cool. The guy that founded the camp, he founded it back in the 50s, and he was a legit cowboy from Texas.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's kind of where it came around from. And then so I grew up as a kid, like that's all I wanted to be, was a cowboy. And I mean, I was a rootin' tootin' cowboy there for a while. It's the tight Wrangler jeans, cowboy hat, I mean, that was everything.
You sounded too, which is perfect, because born and raised in Tennessee, you would imagine it's got to fit in. It's got to fit in sometime. Every that pops out from time to time. Like my Long Island accent pops out every now and then. It's like, oh, you want some coffee? I'm like, Jesus.
Well, we recently moved to Wisconsin, so I've been saying bag instead of bag, just because that's what everybody says up here, and I do it to like mock them basically, but now it's becoming habit where now anytime I say the word bag, it's like I'm saying big instead, and I'm like, I gotta quit doing that.
Sounds like Fargo from that movie.
Yeah.
Great movie. For those who haven't heard of it, it's a fantastic film. I used to ride horses every now and then, and they say that horse riding and just taking care of like a horse in general is some of the best therapy you could ever have. I mean,
I could see that. Owning horses is a drain.
I'm sure. I am sure, and expensive.
Yeah, financially it makes no sense whatsoever. There's only, depending on where you live, sometimes you can own a horse and really can't do anything with it. If you don't have enough space to ride and stuff like that, you got to haul it out somewhere.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, spending time brushing, saddling, just around. I mean, I think nature in general is something that soothes people, and horses are a part of that. And there's something beautiful about you're in a full blown run on a horse. There's no other feeling like it. Like it is, and for to sound as unmasculine as possible, it is magical, man. And you sitting there riding through. Now, trotting, not so much. You're bouncing up and down, but you get in that full blown run, and it is just it's everything dreams are made of, man. It was a lot of fun.
I can only imagine, just like in a wild. We don't have a lot of wide open fields here on Long Island, but we mostly have like, beach shores and stuff like that. And every now and then you do see a few members of the equestrian community riding their horses on the beach, which is nice. And you like, wow, that looks like a James Bond film for some reason. Just like, hey, we're riding a horse out in the middle of the beach. Why the heck not?
Yeah.
You mentioned before, growing up, and would you say that helping out with the horses and stuff like that was a very healing experience for you? Because I don't know how your upbringing was outside of, outside of horse life and everything. Would you say that your life was very easy in that regard? But how would you describe it? I mean, because for those who don't know you.
Yeah, for me, it was less therapeutic and more educational. Okay. You learn a responsibility, because you're talking about something that's very dangerous, something that powerful and that heavy. If you're goofing off, you could literally die. So I learned a lot about responsibility, hard work. I started when I was 11, working with the horses. And did more of the easier stuff then, of course. And then as I grew, more and more stuff. And actually at 18, my senior year of high school, I was in charge of the whole horse program. before I took off for college. So, I learned a whole lot about that. And I think I also found horses and similar to like dogs. I mean, there's a camaraderie there, especially with the horse that you ride, your horse. There's a companionship there that is really unique. And, it's just, it might sound weird, but you can't be lonely when you're with them,
I believe you. I believe you with that. I had, when I was at a local ranch here on the island, we had this big horse, gargantuan horse. His name was Henry, and he was just a few thousand pounds of muscle. And he was angry too. He was an angry horse too. And I will never forget this because I'm a larger gentleman. The trainer that I was with had me ride Henry. I'm like, that guy? That big monster over there? And she goes, I think you can handle him. And he had this nasty habit of almost throwing people off. Very, very unhealthy habit. And I lift a lot and stuff like that, but he was getting a little aggressive, and I just yanked him in the back of the neck with the lead, and he just stopped. And the trainer comes up to me and says, no one has ever been able to do that. And the last few times I was able to ride him, he's been so calm. Mm. He's been so just relaxed with me, and everyone else that rode with him was like, get off me. Let's go on with your podcasting journey. How did the Sports Stove start? Because obviously the Sports Stover, you.
Yep.
How did this whole podcasting journey of yours start?
Well, I'll start with the podcasting side of it, and then I'll get into the passion for it. So I was a regular guest on a podcast back in 2019. A friend of mine had his own show. He now actually hosts on ESPN Radio in Lexington, Kentucky, a show. And before he was on the radio, he just had the podcast. And so I'd go on with him on a pretty regular basis. He had a sports gambling show. And I'm not a gambler, but I'd go on and talk about sports with them. And it was just, we got along well. And so I started thinking, I was like, you know what, it'd be nice to be able to talk about things that I would like to talk about. He said gambling was not something, I'm a pastor also. And so gambling wasn't something I was going to do. And
we'll get to that down the road.
Yeah. And so, like I said, it was he understood where I was on things. We did well, I think, on the show, but I decided, well, let me do something on my own so that I can kind of just talk about sports the way I want to talk about them. So January 1st of 2020, I launched the podcast. And then, of course, in March, everything shut down, sports shut down, all that kind of stuff. It kind of took a lot of fun out of that first year, but
we don't talk about that part.
Yeah. But I was looking, I started just kind of independently on my own, whatever. And then sometime in 2020, I don't remember, I think it was August of 2020. I got in contact with Belly Up and talked with Mike Brown, one of the co-founders. And, we kind of talked through the Belly Up and me. And I kind of explained, I'm very traditional in my sports talk. I'm not a cusser. I listened to some of the podcasts they had, and I was like, I'm going to be very different than what you currently have on the network. And he said, hey, man, that's no problem. Actually, that's really good. All that kind of stuff. And so I joined Belly Up in 2020. And then late 2020 to early 2021, my dad had a heart issue, and he had double bypass, and then was kind of couldn't get out of the house, and stuff like that. And so he was just kind of having a hard time with the recovery. It was a lot harder than he thought it was going to be. And so I said, hey, if I buy you a microphone, will you do the podcast with me? And he's like, yeah. So
like, where do I sign up?
Yeah. So I got on the microphone, and ever since then, me and Dad have been doing the show together. So we started off as just everything sports. We talked about hockey and basketball and baseball and football, and learned very quickly that without a niche, it wasn't really going to grow. So we've transitioned it to a football only show, and we talk a lot of college football and a lot of NFL football, a lot of drafts. We love the drafts, a lot of draft and, all that kind of stuff. And And so it's a lot of fun. We do it weekly there. And then I got into the fantasy baseball show, hosting that now for 3 or 4 years, 3 years, I think, maybe 4 years for Belly Up. And then just started hosting the fantasy football show as well for Belly Up. So, that's where it kind of started and got to. But my passion came from, as a kid, that's just when we were in the car, we were listening to sports talk. And me and Dad, very quick in life, bonded over sports. I didn't get a chance to play very many like organized sports because I went to a tiny little school, didn't have any sports, and our summers were busy with camp, so we couldn't be in leagues in the summer and stuff like that. So for me, it was, listen to sports talk with just south of Nashville. And so there's a guy named George Plaster on the radio, still on the radio in Nashville.
I've heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah. Phenomenal, man. He's a phenomenal sports talk guy. So I grew up listening to him, just always loved it. If we were in the car, if Dad was in the car, especially, sports radio was on, we'd listen to sports. We'd go to, Predators games in Nashville. We'd go to, we'd get free tickets to Titans games. We weren't Titans fans, but we'd go because we got free tickets.
Hey, free
Titans games. Yeah. Right. Nashville Sounds. That's the hat over my shoulder, this shoulder here. Nashville Sounds, the AAA team from Milwaukee.
Nice.
We'd go to that, a fair amount too. And we'd go to some high school football games. I didn't go to a public high school, but they were putting out some pretty stud talent, so we'd go watch the local high school games and stuff like that too.
There you go.
So as far as like the reason why I got into podcasting really was I just enjoy talking sports. I'm kind of a sports geek. I love the off season. Like, I don't follow the NBA, but I'm loving these free agent signings and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I geek out over the off season.
It's crazy because sports, especially over the last 15 years, something like that, has been so heavily publicized in terms of social media, regular media. Like, geez, like you can't turn on any kind of channel without it some kind of promotion for the WNBA, the NBA, baseball, football. For God's sakes, do you remember the Legends Football League back year? That's a very vaguely, but I do too. But I remember the name of the time. I remember the name of the league. For those who listen, you might understand. But anyway, keep it PG, ladies and gentlemen. But let's talk about your faith journey. I wrote in the description of this episode, faith, family, and football. Yeah. Would that be a pretty accurate representation or description of who you are as a person?
Yeah, I think so. For the last 3 years, I was able to coach my kids in basketball, which was pretty cool too. So that's family involved there as well. I think it very well describes, my life. And it's been interesting because I've pastored now 3 churches. So I started at 26. I pastored a church in Indiana, a small town, Petersburg, Indiana, north of Evansville, and a little coal mining town. And it was a learning experience for me, being 26 and had it needing to mature a little bit, and how I viewed myself as far as I felt confident on where I was and how I could lead, and I was quickly humbled there. Now, thankfully, the church was patient with me and let me make some mistakes and grow up a little bit. And I greatly appreciate them for that. But then we started a church in Kentucky in 2014. And so that's where I've been the last 11 years. We started it from nothing. We didn't know anybody there. And, we went and that's where, as an adult, the most growth has come in my life was over this last 11 years. I've had to learn a lot about faith, and I've always been a man of faith, a guy of faith, but I got stretched a lot over these last 11 years. God allowed us to go through some hard circumstances, some tough financial situations, to just as a leader of the home, all that kind of stuff as the husband and father in the home. And so it was a tough journey over the last 11 years. We're thankful that the church is doing well. When we had no intentions to move, we were planning on staying there the rest of our lives, but my pastor from college, so I went to college in Watertown, Wisconsin, and I went to a church for 4 years while I was in college. And my pastor from college gave me a call this summer, which was, I had his phone number, but it's not like we called each other a lot or anything.
Yeah.
And he called me and he said, "Hey, Vince," he said, "I need to retire." He's 71. He said, "I need to retire." He said, wow. Would you consider coming up and taking my place? And I was like, man, I don't know that I'm really invested. At the time I was pastoring the church. I was working full time as a salesperson. I was coaching basketball. I was an athletic director of a program as well. And so I was like, I'm really invested where I am. I was doing stuff we can come back to. I was doing stuff with Eastern Kentucky University, which was a blast. And I was really invested there too. And, but we took a month and we just prayed on it. Wanted to do what God wanted us to do. And God gave us the peace to move. So we packed up in February and moved up here to Wisconsin. And we were able to get a new pastor in place down there in Kentucky and everything. And so we came up here, and now we're transitioning in as the new pastor. He's still here. He's still working, and we're kind of doing a slow transition so the people can get to know me a little bit. And we're getting ready to start a building project, build a new auditorium,
nice.
All that kind of stuff. So it's fun. It's neat. It's been good for my family. It's been refreshing. So now I'm full-time at the church in Kentucky. I had to work full-time outside the church. So that's really nice. We can focus fully on ministry now up here. And
nice.
That's been a real blessing for us, and I think though, when you look at faith again, as a kid, it's all I've ever known. As far as I grew up in church, my parents were in ministry, so I was around it nonstop. Of course, there's not been a day in my life that I haven't been involved in ministry. From the day I was born till today, either my family, my parents have been in ministry, so therefore I was in ministry. And as soon as I graduated from college, I went straight into ministry.
Just right in, like
right into it.
Feet first.
Yeah.
There's a few people that I've known in my life here on Long Island that have perhaps questioned their faith a few times and stuff like that. When it comes to difficult hardships in their lives. I know one person in particular who lost their father at a young age, and this person was brought into the Catholic faith at a young age, and I guess you would call it questioned everything.
Sure.
At that point, was there a particular point in your life? Could you name one or two points in your life where you could go and say, what do I do? Because I'm starting to question my purpose here in this world.
I wouldn't say I've gone that far. When I was in college, there was definitely some moment. I went to a Bible college, trained for ministry, and everyone, is kind of the same in that situation.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit of a troublemaker. So I like to kind of poke and prod at some people and ask some questions, and in doing so, sometimes got me to ask some questions. And what I learned was I needed to know for myself versus just take someone else's word for it. I'd grown up and was raised and taught. Yep. So I believed because I was taught. But that's when I really started to dive in for myself and learn for myself why I believed what I believed. And then when I was in Kentucky, there was many times, we started this church. We put our own money into it. We were invested into it. All of our time was about this church, and it just didn't go the way we thought it was going to go. We thought, I'll move to the city. It's got 450,000 people. This will be no problem. And first Sunday we had 4 people from the community, and then it grew over time. But there were days where I'd sit there and say, Lord, like, what are we doing? Like, am I not doing the right thing? Like, is this my fault? What's the situation, going on with that? But what I've learned through those trials, through the times that you question, maybe not even questioning your faith as much as questioning why. You just ask the question, why, God? Right? That question gets asked a lot. I've just learned you really have to focus in on your personal relationship with God versus your relationship with religion. Like, religion is this massive term that, all kinds of different religions, all kinds of different religious people, but you've got to focus in on what your relationship with God is like, because he's the one that can get you through those things. Pastors are helpful, hopefully, those kinds of things, but ultimately it has to be God. All people fail, so all people are going to fail you. I'm sure you've got people that you used to depend on that you can't anymore. That's just the way life works.
Oh boy, those are stories for you. Oh boy. I mean, I had a close relationship with a couple friends of mine who we were close for 10 years and we drifted apart. We disagree with each other in several things when it comes to, how we treated people, how they treated each other, how I treated myself, and how I, not the matter of fact of how I wanted to be treated, but more important than the fact of like, hey, like, this is how I believe a good person should be.
Sure.
And you mentioned, relationships with God as opposed to religion, because religion is, with all due respect, oversaturated.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. Everyone has a different viewpoint on how people should believe in their religion. And you mentioned how they should feel in a relationship with God himself. How would I word this next question? Because I'm also not trying to anger some people that may listen to this and go, screw this guy, is like the Simpsons, like old man yells at the clouds kind of thing. I mean, how would you describe what the beauty of life or beauty of a relationship with God and just trying to be a good person as a whole?
Yeah. So, I mean, and it really is two different things, right? So being a good person and being in a relationship with God are two totally different things. There are people who are good people who don't have a relationship with God. And so, I think this is what I always tell people. I'm a Bible believer. So I have the Bible for myself. I can read it. I can understand it. Anyone can. And you can go to Walmart and get a $5 Bible, or you can download a free app on your phone. Anyone has access to the Bible, especially in the English language. So the Bible says, taste and see that the Lord is good. And so what I always tell people is, listen, I can tell you how good God has been to me, and I will. I have no problem with doing that. I can tell you story after story after story of God's goodness in my life. But that doesn't help you. So you have to taste it for yourself. You have to experience God for yourself. And what so many people are trying to do in today's world is they're trying to do good or go to church so that they can say, okay, I did that, so now God's happy with me. And that's just not how God works. Nope. God wants to walk with you. God wants to talk with you. God wants to have a relationship with each individual. And so we kind of mark off Sundays or Saturdays or whatever day people worship. We mark that off as the day that we get to spend with the Lord, and the rest of the week's for ourselves. And we think that we can find happiness in it. But what we find is that every single person that lives for themselves, they find temporary happiness. They find maybe a relationship or a hobby or a habit or whatever it may be that makes them temporarily happy. But then they're always searching for more. And the thing that's different with a relationship from God than everything else is that God supplies full happiness, full satisfaction. And so although I still go through hard times in my life, there's still joy in those hard times because of what God does for me, how God helps me. And people, there will be people who will roll their eyes at that and they'll say, that's stupid. That's, whatever. But then I get
crazy redneck over here.
But then I turn it back and I say, taste and see. The Lord is good. You've got to experience it for yourself. And so many people don't give God a legit opportunity into their life to experience what God can do for them. And instead they think, and listen, I've met some really good people who don't believe in God, who don't follow God, don't walk with God. And we've had good conversations and we've worked together, been coworkers, or they've, whatever, neighbors, all those kinds of things. But that they're still going to be searching. You're still going to be searching for something. and God's where the search ends, in my opinion. It's my belief, and so my focus has always been with people, and how I counsel people as a pastor is, if you first handle your relationship with God, then how you treat other people will work out correctly. You'll do right because you have a right relationship with God.
Treat people how you want to be treated, as my mother would say.
Yeah.
And the whole finding the end journey in your search for everlasting happiness ends with God himself.
Right.
Would be the best way to describe it for someone that's, say, in their 20s or something like that, say in their early 20s or late teens, and wondering, who in the world am I?
Yeah.
As a person, like you're going to TikTok to try and find out who you are as a person. Oh, good Lord. Like you and me could have an endless cycle of stupid conversation of social media and the toxicity that it is. I have gone back and forth for what feels like 3 years of just deleting everything on my phone and just keeping everything on the computer.
Dan, how old are you?
I'm 27.
Okay, so I'm 41, and I'm so thankful that when I was a teenager, there was not social media. For many reasons. For many reasons, and really, even in college, it was coming around. Like MySpace was around, but it wasn't really super popular yet. And so, even in college, I mean, I'm telling you, the amount of trouble I would have gotten into, the amount of avenues I would have gone down because of that is crazy. Even as an adult, I've got Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. But it's tough, man.
It makes you wonder, like, count your blessings to a T.
Yes. So me and my boys are planning on launching a YouTube channel here soon, or a program. I might launch it on my Sports Stove YouTube channel. We haven't decided yet. And we're just going to do some challenges with each other. We're going to challenge each other to things, compete, that kind of stuff, have fun with it.
Nice.
My goal in this is to help my kids kind of create their personality, use their personality, get some imagination rolling, because when I was a kid, imagination wasn't an issue because that's all we had. Now they don't have to imagine it. It's all right there for them. But I say that to say this, my wife's concern with it is, well, what about the comments? And I said, well, honey, you don't have to read the comments. She's like, well, I don't want my boys, because she's like, it doesn't matter what you post, someone's going to make a comment. And I was like, well, we don't let them read the comments. It's not that big of a deal. And what we're doing isn't going to, cause, I don't think, any major, backlash or anything like that. We're just going to be dad and his boys playing games. So, whatever, but that's something you have to think about, especially with young people, teenagers, 18, 19, 20-year-old. They're so impacted about what people think about them. And social media has driven that even more so than what we had to do growing up.
Oh my God. Yeah, of course. I mean, nowadays, you mentioned it perfectly, which is people nowadays are so concerned about what other people think about them.
Yeah.
Instead of, when I was younger, quotes, younger, let's call it 17, 18 years old.
Yeah.
When I was 17, 18 years old, I was constantly scared out of my mind about how people would feel about me. It still messes with me here and there, but now most of the time I like to think of myself and go, you know what? I think I'm a pretty leveled out individual. Like I'm not perfect. No one is.
Right.
No one is. I had this running joke until I had Jared on the last BS sessions, which was, I am not perfect. Even God himself is not perfect. Why? He made your rear end. Now, when you think about it, it's like, that doesn't make any sense. God himself is perfect. But then when you think about it through and through, it goes, yeah, everyone is flawed in our own way. Yeah. If we were all created perfect, there would be no evil, there would be no sin. And I believe that flaws and imperfections and mistakes and even sin could be the greatest teachers in life.
Yeah.
And what would you view about that? How would you react to that?
I think that they should be the greatest teachers. They're not always, sadly, because some people don't want to learn.
Of course.
And if you're willing and desire is to, if your desire is to be better, and you're willing to take the lickings that we get through life, you can learn a lot, because you said it. I mean, I go back. People say I would never go back in time. I'd go back in time, and I love the way my life has turned out. But man, I'd go back and I'd change some things for sure, because man, if I could have learned that lesson at 16 instead of 26, that helped me out a lot.
Which brings me to a great question that I've asked multiple guests on multiple editions of BS Sessions. If you could change one or two, let's go to one thing in your past, but that one thing in your past made you the person who you are today, would you still change it, and why?
Oof. I mean, I don't think I would change anything that's gotten me to where I am today.
Okay.
The one thing I always look back to is, man, if I could go back and make some changes that would have not made me rich, that's not what I'm talking about, but would have made better financial decisions, so that I wouldn't have had to put my wife through some things because we needed the money. I wouldn't have to put my kids through some things, or they would have been able to get things that we weren't able to get for them, stuff like that. Because there are definitely, I worked full time for 11 years in Kentucky. Like, I could have made better decisions on which job I took, or quit a job earlier than I did because there were better opportunities out there, those kinds of things.
Trust me, we've all been through that.
Yeah. So that'd be the one thing I'd change, but I wouldn't change anything that got me to where I am. And I wouldn't change the way I was raised. I wouldn't change the school I went to. I wouldn't change, because I met my wife in college, so I wouldn't change that. That's the only reason I wouldn't change that, but I wouldn't change that.
Yeah. Thanks, honey.
Yeah. So, those kinds of things, I really do think if I changed anything, it would be to better my family. It would be to take care of them better. I'm thankful for him. My wife has been by my side all 19 years, and she's been, strong. She's been a counselor. She's been right beside me all along the way. And I always say, man, I don't tell her this because I'd cry if I did, but I say, I wish I could give her what she deserves. And to this point, I haven't been able to do that. Now, I think if you ask her, is she happy? I think she would say yes. I think she would. We can call her down here, but I think she would. But that's the one thing I look at is I go, man, what she's done, what she's putting up with me, what she's endured. I wish I could have done more and still strive to do more for her, because she deserves so much more. I teach my boys that, like, you can back talk me all you want. If you back talk your mom, like, you're not grasping what she's done for you. You don't understand what she sacrificed for you. You better treat her with all due respect and treat her like a princess and queen, or whatever you want to call it. And she deserves the utmost respect. And so, that'd be the only thing I'd change, I think.
The impact of family has been a huge part of your growth as a person, as a man, as a father, as a husband.
Yeah.
What are some parts of your family journey that you can look forward and go to? You mentioned the financial struggles.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with that.
Yeah.
How did that start? I mean, if you feel comfortable talking about it, that's completely fine. If you don't want to.
No, let's do it. So when we moved to Kentucky, our plan was we're going to sell our house in Indiana, buy a house in Kentucky. The house didn't sell in Indiana. so that immediately took us, we went through our savings pretty fast because we were paying mortgage in Indiana and rent in Kentucky. And we eventually rented out the house and whatnot. But by then we had already kind of went through our savings. We were starting this church from nothing. I got a job and I was doing sales, so it was all commission based. I worked for Aflac there and selling some Aflac insurance for a little while, and I did really, really good there when I started off, and then it tapered down. I had an opportunity to take a management or go towards management, or an opportunity to go towards helping clients. I went towards helping clients. The problem was that didn't pay. So so I should have quit that job probably a year earlier than I did. And that's where we kind of got in the bind. We got in some credit card debt as a result of that, and stuff of that nature. And then we started very quickly working our way out of that. So then everything tightened up to get out of debt and be careful with what we're spending and all that kind of stuff. And we were able to get out of debt and whatnot from there. So that really was it. Just that move. Nothing went as we planned it when we moved, and it worked out fine. God took care of us. God blessed us. Like, I'm not complaining about it, but it didn't go the way we thought it was going to go. And so it put us, down a path we weren't anticipating going through. But in that path, we met friends. I met coworkers that I wouldn't have met otherwise. Even bosses that to this day I absolutely love and appreciate. Podcasting as a result of that, because I was working, I was selling radio ads with the guy I was podcasting with. He was working in the studio and I was doing the ads, and that's how I got connected with him. So stuff like that. I don't know that I mean, at some point I'm sure I would have thought about doing a podcast, but I wouldn't have thought about it. I wouldn't have realized how easy it was to get started had it not been that. So a lot of those things brought me down a path where I got to meet a lot of cool people. I got to learn a lot of things, Dan. I did insurance sales, so I learned a lot about insurance. I mean, it's not great, but I now know things about insurance I wouldn't have known otherwise.
There you go.
The radio ads, I can't say I learned a whole lot there, but then I worked in pest control, and I became a bug assassin. And man, I can kill any bug now. I know exactly how to do it. I don't have to spend money to pay a professional to come do it for me. I know how to do it. So I learned a lot about that.
The old Tupperware container of gasoline over a bee's nest. I've seen that before. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I've seen that before. Like, some genius figured out if you take like a tub of gasoline, put it over a hornet's nest, it just kills the hornets like almost instantly. Yeah. It's great. I love seeing those things.
So I did that. I sold some roofs for a little while too, and so I learned about roofing, as well. And like I said, everything that I've been through has taught me things. And you asked the question earlier about learning from those things. Like, that's what you have to do. You have to be willing to learn from any situation you're in, because there's so much to learn. I mean, we think we know a lot, but we don't.
Nope, we do not. Far from it, my friend. Far from it. So your football journey as a whole has been going. You're a Packers fan.
Yep.
And you do also local hour for Eastern Kentucky football.
Yeah.
And you've had a lot of good interviews.
Thank you. Yeah.
On your program, my dude. You have a really solid radio voice. You really do, and you've learned from it. Clearly, you've learned from it. I mean, what was which one of your EKU interviews on the local hour was one of your favorites? If you could pick like one of them, that's a hard one, right?
Well, okay. Let me start with this. I'm going to answer your question. I promise.
Go for it.
The local hour changed the way I podcast. So, originally I podcasted to talk sports and to have some fun, hopefully make some money, whatever. When I started covering Eastern Kentucky, it just completely changed my view on the platform that I have. And what I got to do with Eastern Kentucky is I got to talk to student athletes. And in doing so, it made me understand that I can use the platform I have to help people, and it's not in a spiritual way or anything like that, but it's just these kids, they're going to a university that is just down the road from University of Kentucky. So everyone in Kentucky talks about the Wildcats, and there's a very small group that talk about the Colonels in Eastern Kentucky. Yep. And so these guys, they don't get the opportunities to get on the air. They don't get the opportunities to do radio interviews. They don't, their families, if they got guys coming from Florida, guys coming from out west, their families either have to travel to see them, and then they get to talk to them on the phone, but that's kind of, their glory days may be over because their small town high school, covered them in the newspaper, and now they're at EKU. And so I started getting these, I talked to the university. I got credentialed for the sports. I go to any sporting event I wanted to go to. Basketball, I got to sit on the baseline down on the court. Football in the press box. Baseball in the press box or out in the stands, whatever I wanted to do. And so me and my boys would go to games, or the whole family would go to games. And then I got a football dad reached out to me, and he said, "Hey, my son needs to do an internship." He said, "Would he be able to intern with you?" And I was like, "Yeah." so then I ended up turning that into a co-host. So now I had a co-host that was playing on the football team, and had been through a coaching change, had witnessed the transfer portal as teammates left and stuff like that. So now we got insight. After every game, we got to talk about the game. He would break down things that happened in the game, and then we were able to bring on his buddies from the team and other student athletes from the university. And every week we tried to get 2 student athletes on the show to do interviews with. And so we're doing volleyball interviews, basketball interviews, men and women's basketball, baseball interviews, tons of football interviews, some softball interviews. So, and so, that was really cool. So now I got to know people. I got to know the kids. And now I wasn't cheering for a team. I was cheering for individuals. And it's like, man, I want to see that guy succeed, because now I got to know him a little bit. So it just changed everything about how I was viewing sports, how I was viewing the podcast, all that kind of stuff. So Kylan Robinson came on the show. This would have been right before last football season. So it would have probably been August of last year.
Okay.
And he's a linebacker for EKU. He had missed 2 straight seasons with injuries, got injured in preseason. The first year he got injured in first game or something like that, first couple of games, then injured in the preseason. So he'd missed 2 straight seasons of football. We brought him on, super talented, great athlete, all this kind of stuff. And the dude was just so joyful. Like you could tell he was never taking for granted his opportunity to play college football.
Yep.
And the guy was just on cloud 9, getting ready to play. It was going to be a senior season. When we got done with the interview, I told the co-host, I was like, dude, let's line up and play right now. I was so ready for the season. And 2 weeks later, he got hurt and was out for the season again. And it was just just shattering, because I talked about it up until that injury. Anytime I was on the air, I talked about the interview. I was like, you got to go listen to this interview. This kid, he was pouring his heart out. He was so excited, everything, and man, when he got hurt, I shot him a message and I talked to my co-host. I was like, man, how's he doing? He's like, surprisingly, he's actually doing really well. He's at peace with it. Good. And I'm like, that is so cool. And he sat there all season long on the sideline, and was right there with his guys, and was a perfect teammate through it all. And I'll never forget it, though. I mean, I was so pumped after that interview. And I've got to interview some cool people, and outside of EKU, and then with EKU now I've got Matthew Jackson. He's on the Jaguars now. He got drafted signed undrafted free agent with the Titans a couple years ago. Played special teams for them. Ended up last year with the new coach in Tennessee, ended up not making the final 53. So Jags picked him up. He played some special teams for the Jags last year. So I got to know him a bit. And now it's like, I've got a guy in the NFL that I can shoot a message to that he's always responded to me.
That is awesome.
That's really cool. Then baseball, Ron Franklin Jr. just graduated last year, tried out for the Tigers. Wasn't sure what was going to happen. All of a sudden he gets a phone call, and it's a guy from Banana Ball. And he says, hey, do you want to come try out for Banana Ball? Wow. He's like, yeah, man. Flies to Dallas, tries out for Banana Ball. He makes one of the newer teams, the Firefighters. And so I had him on the show, on the Fantasy Baseball show a couple weeks ago. And he's just so happy. And I'm so happy for him, because it's I interviewed him a few times in college, watched him play in college, cheered him on, all that kind of stuff. And now I get to see a kid who's living his dream. He didn't realize how happy he would be being in Banana Ball versus the Major League Baseball. And he told me, he said, Vince, he said, I would not, if an MLB team called me right now, I wouldn't go. He said, why would I go? He said, why would I go to single A, double A, triple A, I take all that time to work up to the majors when I'm already playing in front of sold out crowds every single night.
Yep.
And he's getting paid. He's having fun, He's living his dream. And so I get to see this kid go from your average college baseball player, and by average I don't mean talent, I just mean you know, typical life there in college, and now he's living his dream, and I can message him and he responds to me, you know. So it's like, how cool is that? You know,
10-year-old you is probably like, this is the coolest crap in the world.
Yes. Let me tell you, like, for sports geeks, mind blown moment for me. I'm sitting at my couch one night watching TV. My phone dings. I pull it up and look. It's a booster from the college messaging me some inside information.
Wow.
I didn't ask for it. I wasn't looking for it. All of a sudden, boom, insider information. And I thought, this is the coolest thing in the world. So I got a booster. I got parents that texted me. Walt Wells, the football coach at EKU, had a heart attack a couple seasons ago, right before the first week of the season. Oof. And I'm in church. It's Sunday morning, and church is getting ready to start. I get a message from the local newspaper, and it says, "Hey, do you know what's going on with the football team?"
No kidding.
He said, I said, I just hearing that something. He said, I think someone died. He said, but something's going on. And I was like, I haven't heard anything. So I shot a message out, did church, you know, got done with church, checked my phone.
Like,
and
boy, I wonder what's really going on right now. It's like,
right. Got done with church, checked my phone, found out. Yeah, I mean, coach collapsed, had a heart attack, practically died. They did CPR on him, saved his life. And he was coaching 3 weeks later. It was nuts. But, you know, that kind of stuff for me is the stuff that I go, I would have never thought I would have had those opportunities to have those, to be able to message a player, to be able to have parents. You know, when you have a mom message you and be like, hey, I've never met her before in my life, right? Thank you so much for having my son on your show. It meant the world. You know, and then what I ended up doing was I did a thing where I did a pregame show at a local pizza restaurant across the street from the stadium. And so for all the home games. And so what I started doing, I started inviting parents. I said, hey, if you're in town for the game, why don't you come over to the show? I did it a good couple hours before the game started. So why don't you come over to the show? We'll give you some pizza. We'll talk to you, get your side of the story, right? And so I had moms on, dads on, stuff like that. And we talked about their kids' high school and how they like EKU and the coaching staff and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And as a sports geek, man, it just, I don't know. I loved it. I loved it completely.
It's just like, I am channeling my own inner Adam Schefter.
Yeah, right. Well, and I'll tell you, Dan, that's what I had to learn then was, okay, what do I post? Just because I know it, do I need to post it?
You got to be more professional than you already were before. I believe you in that.
You know, and because I had a relationship with the coaches. You know, I go to all the press conferences and stuff like that. And I was really the only one covering. I got to be careful here. There was a local TV station that did cover the team. They paid to cover the team. Mm-hmm. They do fine, but no one was covering the team like I was. And so I had this relationship with these coaches because I was there. I showed up. I stayed for the entire game. I was there after the game. I came to practices, all that kind of stuff. And so I had to learn very quickly, okay, just because I know this, do I need to post it? Because I thought I don't need to be the breaking news guy.
Nope.
I got a player that's on my show. I don't want to get him in trouble, you know, because everyone's going to think any information I have, he gave it to me. I was like,
yep. Just gotta think like,
and I was always very clear with that. I was always very clear with that. I said,
it's like boundaries, relationship, integrity.
Right.
I got to protect all three.
Yep. And I was very careful. There were times where I'd take the co-host off the screen if I had to say something that was going to be negative, very, very negative about the team or about a coach or about something going on. Cause I was honest. I wasn't overly mean. I wasn't overly nice. I was honest with what was going on.
Yeah.
And he was too. It always worked out really well, but there were times where I took him off the screen and I said, before I said anything, please understand, he has told me nothing about this. We've not talked about this. Here's just my opinion. Share it, bring him back on the screen. And I'd say, if you want to comment on it, you're welcome to, but you know, I only had one time where the school reached out to me and they said, I was getting ready to have a player on. And they asked me, hey, can you please not bring up this topic? And I said, no problem whatsoever. I won't do it. I won't do it with him, is what I told him. I won't ask him about it. That's what they asked me. Don't ask him about it. I said, I won't ask him about it. No problem. I talked about the topic, but I did it on my own time without him involved. And, you know, and because I was able to build that relationship with the program, I didn't want to mess that up. And,
Nope,
I feel like, overall, I feel like they really trusted me with the kids, and they knew I wasn't going to throw them under the bus. They knew I was, I didn't have a problem with saying, hey, and I love the offensive coordinator, Andy Richmond, but he didn't do a good job last year. And so I would talk about that on the show. Like if I knew as just a fan, I knew what the play was going to be. Surely the defense who watched film on it knew what the play was going to be. So, those kinds of comments. And I still had a good relationship with him, and we'd pass each other and say, hey, and he was a man of faith too. So, we'd had those conversations, and, those kinds of things all played together. And for me, it was so cool to watch these guys. Now there's a couple guys in the CFL this year, got into the CFL that have been on the show a couple times. There's 2 or 3 guys in the NFL that have been on the show now as well. And it's pretty cool.
Speaking of the CFL, where's Ryan when you need him the most? Because he's a CFL junkie.
Yeah.
Good. Wow. I've never seen anyone be more dedicated to the CFL than he is. Out of anyone that I've known.
Yeah.
Anyone that I've known, he takes that cake. Absolutely does. Speaking of relationships, let's take a pivot backwards.
Okay.
Shall we, to your wife?
Yeah.
And the journey that you two been on. Met in college, got married in your 20s.
Yeah.
Kids 19 years later. If you could give someone, like, let's throw this out there, myself, who's getting married in March, some advice and anything like that, how would you give that person some advice about how to be a better husband, be a better father, be a better man?
Yeah.
To your wife and the mother of your kids.
It starts with commitment, right? You have to be committed from the drop. And we got too many people today who are like, well, if it doesn't work out, no big deal, we'll just split. That's not commitment. You look at these high school athletes right now that, they said Florida commit on his official visit to Clemson. Like, wait, what? That's not a commit. So
yeah.
So commitment, that's the key. From day one, me and my wife, when we dated, we were together 3 years before we got married. Dated for 2, we were engaged for a year, and then got married. And from the time we got engaged, before we got engaged, but the time we got engaged, we were committed to each other, and divorce was never an option. Now, I was told, if you ever cheat on me, we're getting divorced. I promise you. But the just saying, this is too hard, we're going to give up, has never been an option for us. So commitment's the first thing. Marriage is supposed to be a commitment. That's the way it's intended to be. It's intended to be till death do us part. That's why it's in the vows. Like, that's what it's supposed to be. So you have to be committed from the drop. After that, man, it's really just about being unselfish. It really is about putting other people in front of ourselves. And, I can only say, as married for 19 years, I'm a way better husband than I was, even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. I grow every year. But it's just about, understanding how you work together. And I think if we live our lives trying to benefit our partner, our spouse, it's always going to come back to benefit us. And so that's what I would say is, live with a purpose to benefit your spouse. And if you do that, you'll always receive benefit as well. It'll just make the marriage stronger. Those early days of a marriage, for us, we were, again, being religious and very traditional in our upbringing. We were pure when we got married. She's the only girl I've ever kissed. And then people find that to be odd, but
not on the slightest.
I don't know what I'm missing. It all works out just fine.
I'm doing my thing.
Yeah. So, for me, for us, it was about just committing to each other and trying to give to each other, trying to benefit each other, and allow then the benefits to be returned. But I do marriage counseling, and I was with a couple recently, and they were talking about trying to stop something that the other spouse doesn't like. And I said, well, you're trying to make them happy. And the problem is when you try to make them happy is they're going to make you mad. And when they make you mad, you're not going to want to make them happy. And so it's really about making God happy. If you make God happy, God's never going to make you mad. So if you focus on God, then everything else is going to come into place. It's all going to fall underneath that. And that's really where the focus needs to lie. So if you're not a person of faith, that's going to be harder for you. But for your listeners, just commit to it. Just be fully committed to it, and it'll work. You're going to make mistakes. They're going to make mistakes. You're going to learn things. I learned, she learned about me and I learned about her living with each other for the first time once we got married. You learn things, about snoring or, the way they eat or, how messy they are, or how clean they are or whatever.
Can you please breathe quieter?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Especially when we got pregnant, when she was pregnant, it's like she could smell everything and hear everything. I'd be in the other room and she's like, you have to crackle that wrapper so loud. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm opening a Hershey bar.
I'm opening a dang Hershey bar. Just let me be. I'm very thankful for my fiance, and she makes me a better man each and every day. And I'm happy that she's in my life, and I wouldn't change that for the world, even if it was like, insert BS excuse here. Nope, not even close. Not even close. I don't take that for granted. Any chance, I would never take that for granted. So, Vince, this was a pleasure, my friend. This was a pleasure to have you on. Where can they find you in your program, my friend?
All right. So on social media, you can find me at Sports Stove. It's on Twitter and Instagram. I have a Facebook page too. Don't do a whole lot on the Facebook page, but nope. Nonetheless, the show with my dad, the Sports Stove Football Show, it's always live on the Sports Stove Podcast Facebook page, and then it goes up on the Belly Up Sports YouTube channel afterwards. And we have the audio available in the podcast version of the Sports Stove Football Show, wherever you get your podcasts. Sunday nights we do the Fantasy Baseball Show. I know I am biased on this, but I think it's the best fantasy baseball show out there, and there's not a lot of great ones out there anyhow. I think a few other people do a good job.
Speaking of, hi, Kevin.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, me and Kevin Wilson do the baseball show. Absolutely love that. And then on Tuesday night, so tonight, when we're done here, we're doing the Belly Up Fantasy Live Football Show. Kevin Wilson joins me for that. Brian Germanaro is on that one as well. And we're putting out, we're dropping articles all the time too on the Belly Up website for rankings and all that kind of good stuff is going out too. So all those things are happening. You can find pretty much all of it on the Belly Up YouTube channel in some way, shape, or form over there. And again, shout out to Mike and Blaine, by the way, and they've been big supporters of mine. Humble brag, if you can call it that. I got this belt up here. I got you guys, my friends there at Belly Up voted me as Content Creator of the Year, and that's the trophy for that 2024. So that was really cool. Put a lot of work, and I take pride in what I do. I try to do everything to the best of my ability, and I think we put out some really good content. So yeah, I'm proud to be a part of Belly Up, and there's so many people involved, of course, Dan as well. And so many people involved with it and have helped me along the way. And, I try to do the same in return as well. So, yeah, that's where you can find me at. If you're ever up in Beloit, Wisconsin, come see me at Berean Baptist Church up in Beloit, Wisconsin. And I'd love to have you. Love you have it there. You can find that on YouTube too. Just don't make any mean comments. All right.
The Department of BS will listen. Ladies and gentlemen, Vince Stover of the Sports Stove Football Podcast of Belly of Sports and Belly Media. Pleasure for having you on, my friend. My name is Dan Cruz. I'm coming to you from the beaches of lovely Long Island, New York. This has been BS Sessions, Volume 52, and I will see you all in this life and most certainly the next one. Cheers, everyone.